Welcome to the Amber Nectar podcast, discussing the things we think about Hull City AFC.
Welcome along to the Amber Nectar podcast, and good to have you along if you can see us right now via Periscope with our live streaming. You can also watch us afterwards, pretty much immediately afterwards, via our YouTube page as well. If you are watching us on Periscope right now, you will have noticed immediately, observant that you are, that Les isn't here, although we are still in his kit room. That's not quite true, actually. He is here, but he's decided to go into another room and respond to your Periscope comments while occasionally shouting things through the door. Jim McVie has joined us instead, and of course you can download the audio version of this via your podcast provider later on. Jim, you're here ostensibly because Les didn't want to take part, but also because this is about the Ipswich game on Saturday, and we felt that your views would be most welcome for this, because it's nice, finally. It's weird, isn't it, to say this, when you think about all the success we've had over the last decade or so. It's nice to finally get a home win, isn't it? Yeah, it is. And firstly, from a selfish point of view, it's nice for me to get a comfortable victory, because normally I get, especially last season, I seemed like I was always doing post-mortems on terrible performances. I can get Sunderland, Sheffield United, Birmingham away defeats. So it's nice to come and talk about a victory, a deserved victory, an important victory as well. I'm not going to pretend that it was the most fabulously flowing football you've ever seen, but you know, City had a good shape, a good attitude, and I think the scoreline was a fair reflection of a game. For Ipswich, it has to be said, were comfortably the poorest team I've seen for quite some time, certainly the poorest this season. I mean, and they include Rotherham in that, because at least Rotherham, they were lacking in a lot of quality, but they had a good attitude and they caused us problems. Well, Ipswich didn't do that at all. They were easy to play against, but it's not our problem. We looked solid and purposeful, and it was just, I don't know, nice to have a game where you are exasperated, you are hanging on at the end, and I don't know, it felt, you know, maybe it's not the best game I've ever seen, but it's maybe a game we should cherish, because there might not be many like that this season. And you know, when you're at the bottom end of the Championship, Andy, as us and Ipswich were, City have climbed to the dizzy heights of 17th now, which is 8th bottom as a result of one win, which just reminds us, I suppose, if we're feeling unduly negative, just how early in the season it still is. But you know, games like the one on Saturday can be immediately earmarked as a sort of one that will purvey low quality football. But although City were playing, as Jim says, comfortably the worst side so far this season, City still had to win it, and you know, given that there's clearly some kind of mental block going on with home games, and win it they did. So the credit still has to go to City, irrespective of how terrible the opposition were.
Yeah, I think that's about right. I don't think it's overly churlish to note that Ipswich are dreadful, but it's still absolutely the case that City have found plenty of imaginative ways of not winning games like this over the years. So to do it is it's satisfying. And I like 2-0 as a scoreline. I mentioned it earlier that I think it just means that you've had by some margin the better of the afternoon, and we certainly haven't said that too often this season. I think in addition to the win, I think it probably sounds counterintuitive, but I think I would have rather have won it 2-0 than 5-2, because I think getting that clean sheet, that's something that I think we really had to do as well, because we've leaked goals so much this season. To go an entire game of football without the other team scoring, well, I was starting to wonder if that might actually happen at any point before the clock's changed, and to have done it now, hopefully it's, and you know, Jim can maybe expand on the reasons why we suddenly looked a bit tighter, but to get that clean sheet, that was important.
Well, I mean, I'm going to ask that question now. Elphick, did he make a big impact when it comes to tightening up the defence and providing more scope for keeping that all-important, elusive clean sheet? Yeah,
he certainly did. He's a player I've probably seen. Well, I know I've seen him play before because he's scored against us this season, but I've not really taken a great deal of notice of. But he's. It was an imposing figure which we haven't had. You know, even though we've got some big players at the back, physically big players, but they don't sort of dominate in the way that Elphick did. And he just felt, you could tell he just felt a bit more secure. And I think he certainly helped Device come out of his shell. Device had a good game. He was the official man of the match. Not sure I would have given him that personally, but it was comfortably his best game for the club, and he didn't do anything silly. He didn't do anything rash. He's almost, you can tell that maybe Tommy Elphick's had a word with him in training grounds, saying, look, I remember you won the first game of the season. You maybe being a bit over keen to impress, which I think that's maybe been the case with Device, and people maybe do need to take into account a young man coming into a different league. And he's not going to just all fall at his feet, is it? But he didn't try and do anything he shouldn't do or couldn't do. He won every header. We were very tight, and also the fullbacks played well. I mean, anyone who knows me will tell you that I'm probably bored and stiff about how I don't particularly think Stephen Kingsley's a good player, but he had a good game. He had a decent game, other than one maybe a bit of a brain freeze where he chested the ball midway through the first half to an Ipswich player on the edge of the box who took a wildly stupid side-footed shot that ended up in the south stand. But other than that, he had a good game, and so did Reece Beck. He actually looked probably more comfortable than any other game I've seen in Reece Beck, and that was him playing at right back. He looked good with the ball at his feet, confident taking it out of defence, more confident I've seen him in any of the other games, and he was crossing. He actually put a couple of decent crosses in, which was quite a pleasant surprise. It wasn't what I was expecting. You think a centre half playing at full back, they normally look a bit of fish out of water, a bit gangly, don't they? I mean, Ipswich had this. I've got to say, I don't know who it was, but one of Ipswich's full backs was bloody awful. He was like Bambi on ice. He was the one who was at fault for the second goal that he tried to show the charge Jackson Irvine, and he just sent himself flying. So it just shows that Beck did well, because he could have ended up making himself look a bit foolish, but he was brave, and he had a bit of confidence in himself, and it was the best I've seen him.
It's interesting you say that Burke did well in what was essentially an alien position for him at right back, because one of the issues I've had with watching Burke this season at centre back is that he doesn't seem to have any composure when he's got the ball at his feet. And of course, as we know in the Championship, defenders tend not to have much time on the ball when they're playing it across the back four. Strikers will press on defenders and force them to release it early or play it back to the goalkeeper. And certainly, that was certainly in evidence at Rotherham, where Burke looked really, really, really. It was so uncomfortable,
especially the first half hour or so.
But when he played,
he was against Rotherham. He didn't look. It's like his head had gone, didn't it?
He gave the soft corner away that led to their opening goal. But when you're playing at fullback, maybe it helped him a little bit in that if you do lose the ball as a fullback, there's a lot more work for somebody to do before they're going to turn the concession of the football into a goal. And maybe that just allowed him just to calm himself down a little bit and work on being a footballer rather than just somebody who's going to hoof it out of play.
Another thing that I know, I think that's a very salient point, that Matt, and it just did give him a bit of a sort of safety net. One other thing that I observed on Saturday was, from my vantage point behind the goal, it's goes without saying these days at City you can hear the players talking, can't you? But Tommy Elphick never shut up, and you see the previous people in the back four, to Beck, Device, McDonald. You just wonder, would they have the confidence to be constantly barking, constantly giving instructions? And I think it must have been easier for David Marshall as well. David Marshall did what he had to do well. He made one decent save in the second half, but it must have been nice for him to not feel like he was on the other end of the Alamo, because pretty much every other game that he's played this season, he's been peppered with shots, and that wasn't the case. So although Ipswich were tepid, like Andy said, it's much down to us as it was down to them.
First home win of the season, Andy, and of course there hadn't even been a draw before that. Previous games had all finished in defeat. If City had lost to Ipswich, it would have been 7 straight home losses when you take into account how we ended last season, which would have been a club record. Club records seem to be coming thick and fast, or very close to coming thick and fast under Nigel Adkins. But the last one was a good one, when we won at Burton and equalled our best ever away win. But 7 home defeats in a row would have been almost as much of a damning indictment of what's going on at Hull City as the lack of bodies actually observing these 7 home defeats in a row.
Yeah, well, you don't lose 7 home games in a row if you're any good, do you? It just suggests that we're rubbish at home, and we've been rubbish at home for a little bit. Although, to be fair, we've also managed to complete the double and be rubbish away as well, plenty. So there's no. it's not. I don't know what the opposite of a fortress is, but that is pretty much how it all is at home games at the moment, isn't it? We must be a team. Do you remember when we went to Coventry a few years ago, and there was about maybe 8,000 there? Their slide was really starting to begin, and there was about 8,000 there, maybe 1,000 from City, and it was just so weirdly funereal. Even the City fans couldn't get going because there was so little.
Yeah.
There's so little excitement and buzz and noise in the stadium, and we won a terrible game 1-0.
Corey Evans second half. Yeah, I know which one you mean now. I was thinking of the John Welsh game, but yeah, go on.
That's what it feels like now. We are Coventry of whatever it was 11 years ago. That's the sort of rot that it feels like is happening at home games, where teams they absolutely know they're not going to be up against it too much here. And I suppose that actually gives City even more credit for managing to do something about it, because there must be a temptation to give up and think all is lost, but they did their bit, and they've done it in unpromising circumstances, because they must know the club's in a state. They must hate playing in front of a 3/5 empty stadium. So yeah, all credit to City, but I do worry about our home form throughout this season. I can't imagine it's going to be great at any point.
Talking about home form, and I don't want to look too far ahead, but I think it was very important that we did beat Ipswich, because if you look at our next two home games, it's home to Middlesbrough and home to Leeds. We don't want to big them up too much. They're games which we wouldn't be favourites. And had we lost to Ipswich, which could have happened, certainly if we'd have played in a similar fashion to it against Blackburn, could have happened, then it would have could feasibly have ended up 9 games on the bounce. Don't know what comes after Leeds. I'm not there to look that far in the future. But
mercifully, we've got 2 away games to think about before that. But yeah, you're making exactly the point I was going to make, which is that that we talked about the fact that we were playing Ipswich in the last podcast before the international break, with an eye on Leeds and Middlesbrough to follow. And anything in football becomes a habit if you do it for long enough, and losing is a habit. Losing at home is a habit, and if you lose at home to the worst team in the division, then players are going to go out onto a pitch, no matter how professional they can try and feel, thinking that it's almost going to be a foregone conclusion that you're going to lose to the best teams in the division, even though I don't think Leeds are going to hang around at the top for any longer than they normally do.
I actually think they might. But,
well. There was always something that will go wrong at Leeds United. There's always some sort of unnecessary implosion that just makes everyone else laugh at them.
I think they'll win it.
You think they'll win it? No. Well, I mean, no, I don't. I can't see it.
Anyway,
we'll come back to that.
Another thing about the Ipswich game, it felt like a game that we targeted, and you don't normally do that in the Championship, because normally you should be confident beating most teams. But it reminded me a bit when we're in the Premier League and you'd get something like West Brom at home, then Chelsea away, Man United at home. It's basically a beatable team in the middle of some not beatable teams. And if you didn't win that game against the beatable team, suddenly your season looked like it was in trouble. And it had that sort of feeling about it. It's because it's not a must win because it was September. But if we had lost, Ipswich would have gone above us in the league. And we would have been in the
we would have been bottom because well, we got 3 points. We'd have been 4. No, we'd have been bottom. We'd have been bottom. We'd have still been on 4 points, and Reading and Preston are both on 5 after their games at the weekend.
So that means we've all realised it was a very important game.
So in defeat, we would have gone 24th and bottom. In victory, we've actually gone to 17th, which is 8th and bottom. And if we win against Wigan tomorrow night, we could feasibly be in not necessarily comfortable mid-table. As Jim's pointed out, it's only September, and you're 1 win or 1 defeat away from a huge leap or a massive plummet in the table.
Can't imagine it's ever been especially comfortable this season.
No.
Even if we stay up, I can't imagine it'll be by a lot.
I like that analogy you made about playing West Bromwich. Do you remember when we played Burnley towards the end of the relegation season under Steve Bruce? That was the game everybody was looking at for weeks in advance, because we had, I think, Arsenal, Man City and Liverpool or something like that surrounding those games in the last 4 games of the season. And everybody had got to a point, especially as the other games went on and we got closer to this sort of group of last 4 games of the season, everyone was getting to the point look, if we beat Burnley, we'll send Burnley down and we'll stay up, and everybody focused on that. And then, of course, we all know what happened. Burnley won and we both went down. Also,
a similar one in our last Premier League season was the game against Sunderland, already relegated Sunderland, in which thought, that'd be a good game. That was a good laugh, beat them, send that, send them down or stick the boot into them, and they just had nothing to play for. Turned up without fear and they beat us. So it's not. Yeah, it's a bit of a. You can see why teams do it. I said to fans, sort of subconsciously target these games, but it's not particularly helpful.
A few things from the game to talk about. Jared Bowen is off the mark for the season. Now, this time last year, none of us really knew anything about Jared Bowen. Then he scored against Aston Villa and kind of never looked back, even though City looked back on numerous occasions during the course of that season. And were either of you concerned that Bowen wasn't the player he was last season just because he hadn't yet scored?
A bit, if I'm honest. I don't know, or maybe people had figured him out, or maybe there's some games earlier on this season people have doubled him up. You're saying about fans didn't know anything about him, but certainly for the first half of last season, it seems like the opposition didn't know anything about him. Maybe he was, I don't know, maybe nerves are starting to set into him, or maybe he was, he's got more responsibility within the team now, and maybe that was affecting him. It could be anything. Maybe it's just the fact that he hadn't got a goal. He seemed to score in spurts last season, didn't he? He scored sort of 3 and 5 games a few times. So maybe, hopefully, that'll be the start of another spurt of goals.
But without the goals, was your assessment of him that he was not playing as well and wasn't scoring, or was he playing just as well for the team this season, but just happened not to have got into the goal scoring position?
Jared Bowen, and I don't want to sound as though I'm being uncharitable to him, but his best aspect is that he's goal scorer. He doesn't do a great deal out. That sounds harsh, but he's in his team to score. In the team to score,
despite not playing as a centre forward. Yeah, he's like Stuart Elliott.
He's he's not got that many assists, and if you take his goals out, there isn't really that much there. And I probably sound like I'm being harsh, but I still think I'm right. But I'm pleased he had a good game. I think he was maybe trying a bit too hard at times and started trying to beat a man one time too often. But he took his goal really nicely, deserved it, and he played well.
Do you think there was any pressure on Jared Bowen to get off the mark?
Yeah, loads, because he's, as Jim says, goal scoring is his best asset, shall we say.
But do you think he's the kind of individual now that is off the mark where we're going to see a flurry, or
I don't know.
Is it because he's not a striker? The point I'm trying to make is he doesn't play as an orthodox centre forward or striker. He's certainly not a target man of any. He plays wide and he plays on his wrong foot. He plays left-footed on the right hand side a lot of the time. So if he's not expected to be in goal scoring positions all the time, is it unfair to expect him to be goal scoring all the time, or at least more than he has been? You see the point I'm making?
Yeah, I do. I think he's got to be scoring because it's borderline whether he's worth being in the team if he doesn't. That's not that. Honestly, I think I know where you're coming from, Jim. Where you sound as though you're picking on him. You feel as though you are, and you're not really doing that because he's a goal scorer. He's probably our best natural goal scorer, even ahead of Dick Campbell and the more recognised centre forwards. It's the one thing he's the best at. But like a lot of goal scorers, lose the goals and what comes next.
Yeah.
Unless you're Olivier Giroud.
Yeah, but thankfully he's not.
I think a lot of the goals Bowen scored. Ones he sort of snaffled from nowhere. He's been in the right position. A lot of goals that you weren't really expecting. You're just coming in at a far post, or shots from outside the box that you weren't expecting to go in, and he just does seem to have that knack, doesn't he? And that's why I think I always would play him, because even if he's not on top of his game, he can get you something. He can get you an important goal, and I'm glad to see him off the mark because he seems a likeable lad. He's got a good attitude. I think he could have. I think he's a player who was actually better served by staying at City, and it's not often you can say that about players in the last couple of years. Because if he's going to play every week, he'll learn, he'll become a man doing it. And what I like about him as well, compared to some of the other youngsters coming through, they look a bit, not just at City but other clubs, they look a bit sort of delicate. Because he's played non-league football for Hereford when he was 16, 17, he grew up very quickly. And he had a bit of muscle on him, he's got a bit of nous about him. And he was, became a man when other people of his age were still kids.
Yeah, he's quite combative, and I like that. I think if I don't think he'd be easy to kick out of the game. I think he would probably be all right with looking after himself in that. And like you say, he's good at finding a little parcel of space. Just that even when he's playing out wide, he seems to be quite good at slipping a marker. And I don't know how easy it is to teach that. I'm guessing probably not very, because it's an instinctive thing to do. So it's just hopefully strikers are confidence players, aren't they? And if he can go and score us 12 goals a season, we're not going to be far away.
But he's not a striker if you look at his position on
No.
the pitch, and that's what I'm getting at. Would we not just be better served playing him playing in the centre of the park?
Yeah, it maybe would be, but you're saying that. What are you expecting of him? Because he's playing there, you just said, coming with his wrong foot. Why do you play wide men on the wing that goes against the natural foot for him to cut in to have shots to attack? He's not a wide midfielder. In the sense of, if we played, I don't know, Todd Kane on the other wing, for example, like we did on Saturday, he's not a wide midfielder in that sense, he's an attacker. So you expect him, I would expect him to score goals rather than to assist goals, because of the way he plays.
If you remember his goal against Forest on telly last season, which the late consolation, where he cut in from the right and swerved one in. I mean, Chris Waddle used to do that all the time. It's quite a grand comparison to make. It's the first one I can think of. But if we talked about Stuart Elliott, who is in the same vein, playing very, very wide, scoring a lot of goals, but on days that he didn't score, you wondered just how much of a contribution he was going to make. But of course, he was also left-footed, but playing on the left. How do you make that decision then, do you reckon, as to whether somebody who's going to play wide but whose job is actually going to be to try and find the net, whether they're going to play on their natural side or their not natural side? I wonder how you make that decision, because Elliott was naturally left, but Bowen is a natural left-sided player playing on the right.
I don't think I particularly like to see Bowen playing on the left. I don't think it'd suit him, because like we're saying, that's his game. He's direct, but he's direct going towards goal rather than the traditional winger going towards the byline and whipping it in. I don't think that's his game. And maybe some people have seen him play for the youth team or for the under-23s or whatever more than I have. Feel free to jump in and correct me. But I don't think he's ever been like that. Because I think when he first came, he was not a striker, but needs must. He fitted in well there. He's he works hard. He tracks back when he has to as well. That's another thing for him to plus point from being out wide. He's got good same as Fraser Campbell has been this season. Tracks back when they need to with a tackle back. So that's probably maybe worked against him in some ways, because maybe he wants to play up front as a striker. I don't know, but it suits him to go.
To answer my own question, one other thing about Elliott, of course, was that he was very good at coming in from the left-hand side when the cross was coming in from the right, from Jason Price or Richard Garcia or Ryan France, whoever it was, and getting his head on the ball, and maybe that was in the thinking. For why he played wide left as a left-footed player.
I've never seen a player like Elliott, though. He had a very, very unusual style, didn't he? He wasn't a sort of jinking winger. He wasn't a traditional winger in any sense, really. He was just, go in the direction of the goal and hit it really hard, head it really hard. And he was
really direct football.
He was direct, wasn't he? Yeah, but he very rarely dribbled past anyone.
He was awful at it, wasn't he? Whenever he tried.
Push it and smack it, and it worked for him.
Yeah, almost all of the time. When Batty went off injured, Adkins brought on Stewart. And I've noticed a lot of comments on social media and forums and what have you, saying that this was the opportunity that Nigel Adkins had to get Jackson Irvine onto the pitch, but he introduced him later in the second half. There's still a lot of criticism of Kevin Stewart. Have we seen any evidence after his longer than expected substitute display on Saturday that things are starting to turn for him?
Kevin Stewart frustrates me because I think, and he must frustrate Nigel Adkins, because he's a player who doesn't take opportunities when they are put in front of him. I think back to...
Are you talking about opportunities in the team as opposed to opportunities in front of goal?
Opportunities in front of the team. If you think of the games he's played in the League Cup games, didn't do enough in them. He was particularly poor against Derby at home when he should have been one of the senior men. On Saturday, I've seen similar comments, I think, to you. I've seen some people say he played really well. Some people say it was abysmal. I don't think either of those things are true. I just think he was pretty anonymous, and it was a perfect opportunity against a tepid Ipswich team that were poor in midfield for him to take the game by the scruff of the neck and do something, and to say to Nigel Adkins, I need to be starting, but he didn't. He wasn't terrible. I'm not going to say it was his worst performance for us, but I don't know. He's just exasperating, because surely there's something there. Surely he was at Liverpool.
He was at Liverpool, exactly, and you know the money was good to get him here. When you think about how much of a bargain Andy Robertson looks now, when you consider that Stewart came as part of the deal. When Irvine did come on, of course, he ended up scoring the clinching goal, and you know this isn't necessarily meant to be detrimental to Stewart or indeed to Marcus Henriksen, who is a player I rate more than I think a lot of Hull City fans do. But there's a bit of a sparkle about when Jackson Irvine's involved, isn't there? And although he was a sort of a sub that came on after the hour, and yes, of course, the goal he scored was a fairly straightforward one right at the end, even though it did clinch the game. There's an element of character about our midfield when Jackson Irvine's part of it.
I think we look a more energetic side when he's in it. I think not only does he bring that attribute himself, but he seems to infuse it in others and encourage. City just seem to play half a yard faster when he's in the side and playing well. I think he could prove to be one of our very most important players this season, because when the going gets tough, I don't think he's someone who's going to particularly mind that. I think he's going to be okay. He strikes me as someone who could keep this energy level for an entire season. He looks incredibly fit, and he's just someone who stuff happens around him, and that's a funny thing. You can't really quantify it, can you, or explain what it is and how it is, but you kind of know it when you see it. And he adds a bit of impetus to City. And when everything else is slow and lethargic and we look off our game, I think he's a good person to turn to. It
worked like that on Saturday. Certainly, he came on, and again he came on with Kingsley being injured, so I wouldn't suggest he was a planned substitution, and certainly not at the time. But he just give everything. He used to give the game a bit of a spark, and the goal he scored, I can't really imagine any of the other players on the pitch scoring it. You know, any of the other midfielders sort of barging through in the fashion that he did. It was a really nice goal, actually. You know, Martin came on. It was a decent little cameo from Martin, who looked like he was difficult to play against. It was a lovely ball from Evandro, and Irvine showed excellent strength and a calm head as well. You know, City had the best at scoring one-on-ones. You know, they certainly missed more than they score. So it was a nice goal, and you could sense the relief and around the players, because every single player other than Marshall ran over to Irvine to celebrate that, and I thought that was quite a nice touch. They could tell. I don't know if it's because they like Jackson Irvine. I can imagine. No, but seriously, I imagine him being quite a popular player on the club. He seems quite.
He's very gregarious sort of character. He's very Aussie. He's very Aussie.
He's an intelligent man, actually. So he's maybe not that Aussie, but he's not like a sort of a sort of David Warner Aussie
funk
tough. But he's his own man. He likes this. He collects vinyl records. He doesn't wear sort of footballer clothes. He doesn't fit the footballer stereotype. And he's not laughing, but he's not. He's just
it's the way that you two described how to interpret somebody of somebody of an Antipodean heritage with not much intelligence. You said oaf and you said twat. I mean, the two completely different.
David Warner, yeah.
Fair enough.
He's like
Lance
he's
from
like
Home and Away.
He's like someone from a band, isn't he? He's like a member of Tame Impala or something like that. He's rather than he won't go and play golf and watch Love Island and do all the sort of and play Fortnite and all the sort of mundane things that footballers do. He'll go out and do what he wants to do, and I think I like it. We're people moan about characters in the game, lack of characters. I don't think we have many really, but I think he.
Yeah, I agree.
He's the one. That's why I think why fans seem to like him. He's just a bit different.
He's also a good footballer, though, isn't he? I mean, we got given how awful we have been in the last sort of year or so, possibly more than that. He's just got an X factor. I hate that phrase, but he has got something that. Let's face it. I mean, when Stewart came on instead of Irvine for Batty, there must have been disappointment that the opportunity to bring Irvine into the game had not been taken up by Adkins.
Well, I think my reaction was, Irvine can't be fit then. But
maybe he was fit enough for half an hour, because that's what he did, or nearly half an hour.
Or maybe Adkins was thinking, go on then, Kevin, here's your chance, show me what you can do.
And it was only just before half time as well.
And he didn't do it. And let's go back to Stewart. As soon as Daniel Batty's fit, he's starting again. It's a sad indictment of Kevin Stewart, but the fact that a young lad's just automatically going to take his place, but deserves to.
But you can imagine Irvine being alongside Henriksen tomorrow night against Wigan, can't you?
Yes, I would play him there. I don't see how he couldn't. It doesn't always work for him, and sometimes things that he tries don't come off, and sometimes he hasn't got the best first touch. But he never goes hiding. It's like David Marler in that respect. Even if David Marler was having a bad game, he'd always want the ball. He'd always want to be involved. And I think for the season that we're anticipating as having, that's probably quite a good trait to have in a player.
You mentioned a nice cameo by Chris Martin right at the end. Kamil Grosicki was on the bench, of course. Do you think there was ever any prospect that he was actually going to be picked to play in the game? Or picked to come from the bench?
Yeah.
Do you think it was Nigel Adkins was making a point, or it was an element of tokenism, or he literally had nobody else to fill the bench with?
No. I thought when he was named on the bench he'd come on.
I think he would have come on had Kingsley and Batty not got injured.
Do you think he would have been coming on if we'd been chasing the game?
Yeah. You talk about...
Because that's the key, isn't it? If we've been chasing the game and you've got a very natural attacking footballer with a bad attitude on the bench, that's when Adkins has to make the decision, right, are you now up to the challenge of being a proper professional again?
He's got to play. I don't know if he's got a bad attitude or if he's just a bit daft. I think he just looks daft. And he acts daft. But he ain't going to get a better move if he just sits around twiddling his thumbs till January, is he? He may as well play. He's out, he's out the Poland squad now. So if he's got anything about him, he'll want to get back into that squad. And how's he going to do that by playing for the under-23s? And I think he would have come on, actually, if it not been for those injuries. And I think it would have been a decent substitution to make because, like you say, Irvine gave us a bit of impetus. I've got a teeth in. But Grosicki would have done as well. And he's one of the few players, if you're an opposition player or fan, you think, oh, bloody hell, they're bringing him on. There's not many, is there, in our squad where you think, he wouldn't, no offence to Kevin Stewart, but he wouldn't have exactly frightened the Ipswich fans.
I think it was Kevin Stewart who did give impotence, wasn't it? Irvine the impetus. Okay, let's talk about the crowd. Not necessarily what the crowd were doing, but just the actual numbers that turned up. The attendance that was announced was 11,650. Now, this was being earmarked by everybody who's clued up on this sort of thing, especially after that BBC survey last week as well, as going to be the first game first league game, which will have a four-figure gate since the stadium opened. If we allow for this sort of seasonal adjustment or weekly adjustment, if you like, of 20% that the Allens always enjoy to put onto our attendances following that freedom of information request that you made last year. If that's the case, two things. Firstly, that does mean that there were just over 9,000 or just under 10,000 actually there at the game, which would therefore confirm that the genuine attendance was a four-figure number, which is horrendous, and that's 15,000 people who've gone. Secondly, given that this has only just happened, it's quite an interesting sort of social observation to make that one by one there are just a few more people giving up on City home games. If this is the point where it dips below five figures, I know Ipswich don't bring many, but if this is the point where it dips below five figures, then is it just, are we going to have a couple, 100 or so more next time not going, and 100 more so next time not going? Leeds and Middlesbrough will bump it up, obviously, but there will be games like the Ipswich game, when we play Reading, for example, later in the season, or Bristol City, for example, who won't bring enormous numbers. Swansea might not bring enormous numbers, for example. Are we seeing a little downward trickle, and this is kind of a watershed moment as a result?
I would guess that this is the new normal for the rest of the season.
What I would say is actually, I try not to think about it too much because I find it dispiriting, but it seemed like there was roughly the same number of City fans at the Ipswich game as the ones at the Derby game. Derby bought a decent following. Ipswich bought an okay following, considering the distance and their current form, but probably half the number Derby did. So that would pretty much even itself out. The thing I found was what should be really ringing alarm bells for the City. It won't, because the people who should care don't care. But it was £12 to go to the game on Saturday, and I didn't know that until today. Admittedly, I'm still a member, so it doesn't really concern me, match day prices. But if you're going to do it as affordable football, not many of our games are affordable. At least let people bloody know. They're so stupid.
Yeah.
They should have been having that on advertising boardings and all sorts, adverts in the paper. if you're going to make football affordable, one of the few games this season that will be affordable for people, at least bloody push it. Because
do you think that's how they're operating though? I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll say we'll have £12 a ticket, but nobody took up the offer.
Yeah, surprised me.
Yeah, but ultimately you're right. They've got to publicise this.
Any other club, I don't know, to pick someone, Wigan, say, because we're playing them tomorrow and they don't feel they're gone. But if it was £12 for adults for Wigan versus City tomorrow, I guarantee you it'd be all over their social media, all over the local news.
And a lot of casual people will just walk up to the game, won't they?
Pay on the gate at Wigan, which I dare say you can do. But obviously not at City.
No.
So there's no point in sort of doing half a good thing, because it still ends up being a pretty shitty thing if you don't give people the opportunity or the knowledge that is going on.
Do you think that eventually things will sort of flatline as far as attendances are concerned, a bit like they did when we were in the bottom division, and there'll come a point where the attendances will stop shrinking for as long as the Allams are here, because ultimately there will always be people who will go, irrespective of the ownership. Like you two guys always went in the 1990s, when we also had appalling owners and worse sides in worse divisions playing worse opposition in not as comfortable a football ground.
I don't know. I wouldn't want to be sounding complacent and saying this is it, we've bottomed out now.
I still think it can get worse, but there'll come a point where it doesn't get worse.
Well, there will, but how close to zero will that point be?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it does depend as well on how we're doing as well, as much as anything, and you can't discount that as a reason. So, and one of the many moronic things about the membership is that it gives people the opportunity not to go, because it just says, you know what, if we I don't know, lost 3-0 on Ipswich on Saturday, we'd have probably had a couple of hundred people slinging the memberships, wouldn't we? It gives people a get-out clause that a season ticket wouldn't have. So it could go lower if we have, I don't know, if Borough and Leeds absolutely turn us over. Next home game after that, I don't know what it is, but it could be an officially announced 4-figure crowd.
There's a double whammy, isn't there, of appalling ownership and a team not playing well. And going into the Ipswich game, City had both. At least after the Ipswich game, there's scope for some optimism, and we have to take that into the Wigan and Reading games over the next few days, because Leeds and Middlesbrough do follow. And that's the danger we've got about these next two away games now. We've got Wigan tomorrow night, we've got Reading, who were bottom before Saturday of the table on Saturday, both away from home. We're almost going into these two away games thinking we've got to do well because of what follows, rather than concentrating purely on these two games.
We have got to, because, and I appreciate that Nigel Adkins would never say it, but he understands that the three games that we're 1/3 of the way through now, Ipswich, Wigan, Reading, it's an awful lot easier than the three that follow. So, we've really, really got to get something decent from this little group of three games, because otherwise we're going to get cast adrift. Now, we're in a much better position than we were a week ago, when we were contemplating the awful consequences that defeat against Ipswich would have brought. We'd have been really, really up against it, and we've got a bit of optimism now. We've got to temper that by saying a bit, and it's worth remembering that our next two games, even though one against the mid-table side, one against a poor Reading side, they're still away games, and they're going to be hard as a consequence of that. So we can't be suddenly expecting that when we reconvene next Monday night, we're going to be basking in the glory of 3 successive wins, because I can't quite see that. I think what's important is that we don't think that the job is, for want of a better word, almost done because we've got one win from this little group of games. We need to push on and get something, something else.
I mean, stating the obvious here, but it would be nice to win one of them, wouldn't it? Because especially if you could pick the Reading game. I know you can't pick which games you win or lose, but I'm just looking at the table now. Reading have lost all 3 home games, so Reading are in the same situation that we were prior to Saturday. So they will probably be looking at the game against City in the same way that we were looking at the game against Ipswich. So if we've got anything about us, we could maybe be trying playing on their fears, try and get the crowds against them. Reading's, they're a bit, in a lot of ways, like a southern version of City, I think. They're similar size club, similar size ground, similar recent history, and they have similar sort of problems now. So there won't be a big crowd at the Medeski Stadium, and there won't be a good atmosphere, and the players probably aren't particularly enjoying playing the home games there. So if I were Adkins, I'd say go for the jugular against Reading, especially.
I suppose you're right about if you want to win one of them, you win the game against Reading. Having said that, Wigan is first, so therefore if we do beat Wigan, the good thing from that is that will be more impetus and maybe give us even more of a chance of beating Reading, whereby defeat to Wigan or even a late draw or something against Wigan might not necessarily provide that momentum to go into the Reading game.
Two very open games, and I think the two games in which any result can happen. I wouldn't be surprised to see us losing both. I wouldn't be particularly if we won either of those games. I wouldn't be astonished.
Wigan are unbeaten at home, so if we are going to go and win there, then it would be an unusual event for Wigan this season. They've won 2 and drawn 1 at home so far this season, but their away record, they're 11th in the table. Their away record is much poorer. They've won 1 and lost. They've won 1 and lost 3.
It may be a bit of promotion team bounce in that. They seem to have. They can't really work. They're not really good enough for the Championship, but too good for League One. That's what they've been.
And yet they've got recent vintage as a Premier League side and as an FA Cup winning side. I'm sure that they think that with some good management they can go back to where they were.
I mean, obviously it's probably a total exception to what the recent games, but they played Manchester City in the Cup. I watched that live on TV last year, and I thought they were fantastic. And I thought at the time, I remember saying to my wife, watching it, they're a better team than we are, and they were in League One. So it's going to be. Not going to be easy games, but the games shouldn't be favouring either, I'd say.
Andy, talk to us about the accounts.
Well, we still owe an awful lot of money.
This is the Hull City, not Amber Nectar, by the way. Carry on.
Yeah, Amber Nectar. We've got about 33 quid in our Amazon at the moment, so things are looking good.
Excellent. We need to appoint a treasurer to decide how to invest it wisely.
I'll just spend it all on beer.
Again.
Give it to City.
Well, we buy Ethan when he's present.
So the accounts have been released, and the debt has been reduced.
The debt has been reduced, and it's because the spending at the club is all but ground to a halt. And I said this morning on things we think it's not a bad thing to try and cut your cloth in the Championship. You've got to do it, and we've seen the predicament that other clubs have got into when they carry on spending Premier League wages in the Championship. It's going to get you eventually. I think where City have misjudged it so much is that they're probably taking a League One approach to life in the Championship, and eventually you're going to find out that you've got a League One team in the Championship, and you're not going to stay in the Championship forever doing that. I think the scale of the reduction in player wages has been too much. I think the fact that we've swapped permanent players for short-term loanees has had an obviously poor effect on the team on Saturday afternoons, because quite often we look and play like a bunch of strangers, and the methods in which they've gone about cost-cutting at the club, which is to get rid of concessions, it's just vile. So they've done the wrong thing in the wrong way, which, to be fair, is not entirely out of character.
You got any comments to make?
No, not really. It always makes me laugh when the accounts come out, because it seems like everyone tries to. I know I'm not an accountant. I sort of understand them, but I'm not going to pretend. People sort of look into them a bit too much. Everyone seems to have their own take on it. I say I agree with Andy's from what I've seen of them. Whoever writes the headlines of the Hull Daily Mail, I think they put something like our accounts were the envy of the Championship or something.
Did Ehab write that?
Well, I doubt it was Phil Buckingham. I don't think.
It wouldn't have been if it was a headline. It would have been a sub-editor.
No, someone who's not really read it, not really read the article, but gave a false impression. Yeah, it was for what it's worth. It kind of looked how I expected them to look.
Yeah.
Okay. Have either of you read any of the extracts, locally and nationally, of John Parkin's autobiography?
Yeah, I feel quite a hypocrite now, because I really, really wanted John Parkin in the last 3 weeks. I haven't spent around about 15 years having no time whatsoever for him.
Well, I mean, we all loved him for the first sort of 6 months that he was at City. And we did, feed the beast and he will score and all that. I remember you putting the phrase "master of the beastieverse" in a match report when he. When he scored at Luton and we won 3-2, one of those games when Kevin Ellison was somehow reborn as a very left-footed right winger. But yeah, I mean, some of the stories, you're not surprised by absolutely anything that you're reading when it comes to John Parkin's career. Although the confirmation of it in black and white is quite alarming, that he was able to do some of this. It's sort of like a a Billy Whitehurst du jour, but without being particularly hard in the process.
Yeah, it's a funny one, John Parkin. I remember when we signed him, I was absolutely mortified.
I was furious.
But I remember, what I'll say about this up, my opinion of John Parkin was entirely made by me actually seeing him play. And I remember last time he played for a team against City, he played for York, and a game on Boxing Day at Bootham Crescent, he played at the back. And honest to God, he made me look like Usain Bolt. Right. Shire Ross, not even a cat, it's a Shire Ross. And I thought, we're new to the Championship, we're going to pay a bit of money for this.
It was 150 grand.
Yeah, but it's still reasonable whack for us.
Oh, it's a lot of money, honestly. Yeah. It's a lot of money.
A dollop from Macclesfield. And then, honestly, within 10 minutes of his first game, I felt so guilty about seeing his ways because I absolutely loved him.
That goal he scored against Crystal Palace, it was one of the most dainty, self-made goal, one of the most dainty sort of bits of skill to get the ball under control and a beautiful sort of tucked finish underneath the keeper. And I remember you, me and Les in E5 sort of looking around at each other going, was that John Parkin there? While celebrating the goal, because we were 2-0 down, so it wasn't a big celebration, it was like, good, we're back in the game celebration. Yeah. But was that really John Parkin that did that? And up to and including the point where he scored the winning goal against Leeds in the April with about 3 or 4 games to go, he could do no wrong. But the point was, after that, and certainly after when he came back massively overweight in pre-season, by which time Phil Parkins was in charge, he then could do no right.
I think he still had his plus points next season, because there was a thing on, I think it's from City's official website, it was on this day, one of those on this day's things, had videos of them, a couple of goals scored against Wednesday.
Yeah.
You know, our first ever televised victory. One of them was beautiful over the shoulder volley. But I take your point broadly. I think he loved Pete. I've not read his book. I've heard him a few things at times on Under Kosh, which is, you're not supposed to. Are you supposed to mention other podcasts on this? Is it a bit
Carry
like
on.
When Diamond Dallas Page turned up on Raw or something, Andy? You're not supposed to give opening up a new word. But yeah, I found him a really genuinely interesting listener, and he's very honest. I think he likes Pete. I get the impression he loves Peter Taylor, wants a keen on Phil Parkinson and native Phil Brown. And his career sort of went with that. The game, but he was a very talented footballer, far more talented than I realised when we first came. And I think if he's honest with himself, but either with City or with Stoke, he could have had a role in the Premier League in either of those teams if he'd have pushed on properly.
And yet, he never played a single minute of Premier League football.
He could have done and he should have done.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about City and Stoke, of course, probably the best goal he scored for us was against Stoke with a sort of a bit of heel-toe Cruyff turn magic to make it 2-0 in that game, that 3-0 win at Stoke where Bosmail saved 2 penalties and Stoke fans ended up beating each other up. It was one of the greatest afternoons ever.
That was fantastic.
It was absolutely quality afternoon that was. And yeah, I remember he scored against Luton, he scored against Southend, he scored the winning goal against Leeds, which was our first win over Leeds in I think it was 19 years, something like that. And we were used to not beating Leeds home and away, and John Parkin scored the winning goal, quite a late winner in that game as well. I mean, I remember the last sort of thing he did for City that was of any great consequence was he scored a penalty in the FA Cup replay at Middlesbrough. Yeah. But he got sent off to not sent off, but sent away to Stoke not too long after that on loan. Of course, I think the final nail in the coffin for John Parkin as far as Phil Brown was concerned was when he was forced back to City in a crisis to play against Stoke, came on as a late sub and pretty much spent his time on the pitch despite wearing the Hull City kit talking to Stoke City fans and playing absolutely no role whatsoever.
About that.
And that's the sort of thing you do need to question John Parkin about.
Yeah, Nick Barmby scored the last minute equaliser, which gave us I think it was a 5-minute spell where I think Leeds conceded a goal and they had an away game that they lost 1-0, and then about 2 minutes after that we got the last minute goal from Barnsley, so City had pole position going into next week at Cardiff when we ended up staying up, and the players going absolutely ballistic, and afterwards all the fans were going wild, and Parkin just cut this sort of solitary figure. He didn't look arsed.
I love the story that just one story that he told about his time at Preston, where he was phenomenally late after a night on the sauce for training and knew he was in real trouble. So the only thing he could think of was to ring his manager Alan Irvine and say that he'd been in a car crash, and he hadn't. But he then spent the next 5 days borrowing cars from friends so he could drive into training in a different car each day, which was a different hire car according to him. So it looked like that his car was being repaired. So he actually faked a car crash in order to get out of training. And more to the point, his manager Alan Irvine didn't know that, but does now, because he's put it in his book. Anyway, I might put it on the Kindle, and I think it might be an interesting read. We're a bit over time, but obviously we do have something else to talk about. 10 years ago this week, those 2 goals by Marlon King gave City a 2-1 win at Newcastle. If not necessarily the best victory of that phenomenal first season in the Premier League, was one of the most eventful occasions of that whole season.
Yeah.
There were all sorts of occurrences, mini occurrences within that whole afternoon at St James's Park that we can all sort of think back to. Let's talk about the win first, because I mean, Newcastle were all over the shop, but because of what was going on behind the scenes, and because when that crowd gets on the backs of the club, they never get on the back of the team at Newcastle, not very often anyway, but they do get on the back of the club. You always feel like the team is being affected by it, because they're in this middle of this soap opera that they've got absolutely nothing to do with. And it certainly felt like that on the day, and City took full advantage.
I remember when we went up to the Premier League, firstly I hoped we won a game. That was taken care of on the first day, so that was jolly nice, because it was only 8-1. The bookies that we didn't win a single game all season. I think they thought we were going to be Derby, but worse. But then I also really hoped that at some point we'd manage to nick an away win, which I figured would, maybe against one of the teams we came up with, or a very off form. Who was cracking Southampton or someone like that, or no,
Sunderland or a West Ham.
Someone like that. We just caught them on the wrong day, maybe in April when we were already down or whatever. I don't know quite what I saw it coming. I wanted to win an away game in the Premier League. I figured it was our only season ever in the Premier League, and I wanted to go to someone else's ground and score more goals than them. And I certainly didn't expect it happening in mid-September. But
it was Newcastle who were. They always felt beatable, I think, going into that week, and then it all imploded up there when Kevin Keegan left.
But it's hard to remember what it felt like back then. But no one felt beatable at the time, because we were Hull City in the Premier League, and they were Newcastle United.
They weren't a very good Newcastle United.
But that's not really what I was thinking at the time.
As proved by the end of the season.
But you're saying this, Matt, but they were never relegation favourites.
Am I talking with benefit of hindsight too much, do you think?
With respect, I suggest you are.
With respect, indeed.
Yeah, because we were never the favourites in that game. We were barely favourites for any games all season. We certainly weren't in that one. Newcastle still had some decent players. That's the thing they weren't.
Michael Owen up front.
Yeah, Michael Owen played against
European
City.
Player of the Year.
So you said it wasn't one of our best wins of that season, but at the time it felt like it was. At the time. For all we knew, it could have been the highlight of the season. So it was really well celebrated, wasn't it? It was.
Yeah. City were sweaty as well.
Yeah.
It was a great
2-1 flat at Newcastle. That's my memory from that game. Michael Turner had a perfectly good headed goal disallowed. In front of us. At the end, we were.
You can see the whole city of Newcastle from the away end at St James's Park. They're still using that away end now. It's vertigo-inducing.
It wasn't the first time I've been to St James's Park. I've been to the League Cup game under Hurley, but that extra tier didn't exist then. We were in a decent view in the corner. And I'm not normally bothered by heights, but freaking hell, I mean, you go up there for the first time, it's something else, and it takes you 20 minutes just to get your bearings.
You can walk into the ground on time and still miss the kickoff because you're still clambering all those ludicrous flights of steps. But once we were there, and once we were in place, then we noticed that City weren't wearing the correct shorts and socks. I mean, it's not something we can necessarily comment on. If Les was here, then no doubt he would have something to say about it. But the upshot was, and Les did say, has said in the past, when this Flint kit that we had, and if you're watching on Periscope, that George Boateng shirt behind us was worn at Newcastle that day, was fully Flint from shirt, shorts and socks. And as a consequence, the question was asked by Les, at least, to himself, if not anybody else, what are you going to wear at Newcastle? And nobody seemed to have asked this question within the club until they actually arrived at Newcastle, showed the referee the kit, and the referee said, you can't wear that, wear the shirts and find another pair of shorts and socks. They didn't have any, so they had to borrow Newcastle's away shorts and socks, which were in white, and nobody liked. Well, I say nobody liked. I've not heard many people who liked the Flint kit that much anyway.
No, I didn't like it.
But you know, so that it wasn't great PR for the club that the very first time we wore this cracking new kit, allegedly, because that's what they were marketing it as with the Caleb Folan adverts and so on, we actually couldn't wear it. We had to wear somebody else's shorts and socks because there was too much of a clash going on with Newcastle's home strip. Then the game got underway, and even before Marlon King scored the penalty after Halmosi was spectacularly fouled by Nicky Butt in the first half, already the protests had started, and they started running in front of us, didn't they, with that Cockney Mafia out banner, and just kept going round in a circle.
They say boycott or something, B-O-Y-C-O-U-T-T.
Yeah, they spelled boycott wrong.
Was it supposed to be down words and out, or did you just spell it wrong? I don't know, but it was not something, but it was that protest. But we seemed enough to rattle Newcastle's players, and it probably ended up falling quite nicely for us.
Marlon King scored the penalty and then scored. It was a brilliant second half goal from him, and I think we don't underestimate how good a player he was, even though he was a nefarious evildoer, to quote Andy in one of his reports. He was a brilliant footballer. But beyond that, that was a brilliant goal, because he looked just for a moment that when he cut inside, he'd lost the momentum to be able to get the shot in. And Fagan was free, and there was a split second, I think, where we all probably thought, don't be greedy and hit this, when Fagan was free to his left-hand side. And then that split second later, it's nestling in the corner of the net, and we are going absolutely crazy. I'm amazed no City fans fell over that upper tier because of the...
Well, they wouldn't have landed yet, would they?
But what a great second goal that was, and what a moment for us as supporters who've not experienced anything of that high level. I'm not talking about the ground, but that high level of achievement in league football, than to see a player that we would never have got in any other circumstance other than on loan in the Premier League scoring a goal like that in a circumstance like that.
What ball by Halmosi? It was Halmosi.
It was Marnie.
Yeah.
Halmosi had a very good game that day. It was comfortably his best game for us.
Halmosi won the ball, and then Marnie played the pass to Marlon King.
Yeah. I still didn't think City were going to win until the second one went in, even though we were the better team for the bulk of the game. I thought, even at the time, I thought that was how it was going. It was just flipping mega on it. It was a proper writhing around limbs all over the place in the away end.
And even their goal was a fluke, because Xisco, who scored it, the guy who's signing by Dennis Wise, kind of, can you imagine Dennis Wise being above Kevin Keegan at Newcastle United? I mean, I know that Mike Ashley's made some boneheaded decisions over the years, but that's clearly one of the worst. But he was the player who was signed by the club without Kevin Keegan's permission that prompted Keegan's resignation in the first place. And we know that Kevin Keegan spits dummies out quite easily in football, but even so, it was a strange bit of business, not necessarily for the player, but a strange bit of business in the way it was conducted by the club, knowing that Keegan, having done it once before, could have easily walked out again. But he scored their consolation, and even that was a fluke. Owen hit a shot against the post, and it basically hit Xisco and went back into the net past Myhill. But I don't recall Newcastle being that. I think they might have had one chance kicked off the line, but beyond that, I don't recall them being sort of that close to getting an equaliser in the 10 or so minutes that remained.
No, I don't think they were from memory. The thing I've fond memories about this game was we won it playing football, didn't we? It wasn't a sort of smash and grab goals from bad defending by Newcastle, or a couple of goals from a corner or whatever, or deflected goals. We won by playing good football. Even the penalty we won was won by playing good football, turning their defenders, rather than chicanery or stupid defending by Newcastle. And that was probably something that we thought we'd never see. I remember the previous away game when we drew 1 all the way to Blackburn. I was chuffed as anything with that.
Yeah,
we're deservedly drawing away to, at the time, we were an established, well-run, good Premier League club. You forget that about Blackburn now, but they were an absolute staple, weren't they? Another thing as well from that game was the Craig Fagan getting absolutely walloped by Danny Guthrie for no real reason as well, but he absolutely smacked him.
Well, Fagan was doing the hiding in the corner routine to try and waste seconds, and he already had.
Yeah,
exactly. And he already had. I think it was Charles and Zogby already had him closing him down. Then Guthrie appeared from nowhere and just took his leg. And the weird thing is, Fagan broke his leg, but he still stood up and protested. And it was it was an injury that he didn't clearly immediately feel, but obviously it happened there and then. A couple of key debuts. Paul McShane's debut for City after signing on loan from Sunderland. He played at right back instead of Sam Ricketts. I mean, do you know that Giovanni didn't play that day? Giovanni was on the bench and never came on, so we did it without our sort of talisman attacking midfielder. So no.
So who came in for him then? Would it been Halmosi?
Well, Mendy and Halmosi played, so we obviously played it's a big pitch at St James's Park, and so Phil Brown went wide, and then we shored it up a little bit more by playing Marnie alongside Ashby in the middle. Marnie had a good game, as I said. He set up Marlon King for the second goal. But yeah, I remember Zayati coming on, and I think it was more about the following week against Everton, really. But I remember Zayati coming on with about 7 or 8 minutes to go, and he clearly went on to play in defence, but he still did one of those runs that we got to know Zayati for over the next year or so. So
looking at that Newcastle team, it's a decent team.
Yeah.
Colaccini, Jeremy,
Nicky Butt, Michael Owen, yeah.
Shea Given.
Jeremy played for Real Madrid at one point, didn't he? Shea Given in goal, Colaccini. Yeah, it's
you know, I mean, I think Newcastle didn't have a bad team that season. They had certainly the first 11 was a better team than ours, player for player. But it was just chaos at Newcastle.
I mean,
that's the reason they went down.
They had Chris Hughton in charge, having lost Keegan. They then brought in Joe Kinnear, who then had a heart attack in the next time City went up there in the FA Cup, and then they ended up with Alan Shearer taking them down. Something that I don't think he's ever really managed to fully live down. He's certainly gone nowhere near a management job since. At the conclusion of that game, City were 4th in the table after 4 games. 2 wins, 1 draw, 1 defeat behind Chelsea, Liverpool, and Arsenal. And yet, over the next month or so, it was actually only going to get better, wasn't it? Which you didn't think it could get better after walking down all those stairs against at Newcastle and seeing how gutted they were as we walked back through to the monument metro station. It was brilliant.
That's why I like going to city centre football grounds and like Newcastle's, and they did not like that at all. Losing to us, he was like they lost to. The Black Spartans or something. They were absolutely raging. It was hilarious.
And there we go. Thank you very much.